Okay. Um. So we're going to be discussing biblical slavery for the third time now. Um. We
Third
both
time's a charm. That's what they say, right?
we're going to go with that. Yeah, absolutely. Um. So we both agree. We're just going to grant that the Exodus happened. Um. Uh.
Sure.
Did you go into when before I think on my end it was dropped. Did you go into because the statement you made that you can treat a slave however you want, you can beat them, you can kill them, you can do whatever you want. Are you more conceding that point that maybe that wasn't the case, or did you have something to back that up?
I was conceding the point that that maybe individual societies and the surrounding nations, maybe they had certain rules on that sort of thing. I again let just like you, I haven't studied the individual rulings on that.
Okay.
Um,
So
so we'll go ahead.
so just it's just I mean if you want to keep going on that we can, or are we moving off that point that maybe it wasn't you can beat and kill and do whatever you want? Can we
Sure.
both? Okay, okay,
My yeah my whole point in going into that was if it was already something that uh that was practiced, then it would go without saying it you would need to make rules about it. Was my whole line of thought there.
okay.
So like it's like hmm,
So as far as I can tell, they came from slavery, and they escaped Egypt. They went
mhm.
and they founded their own land. So they didn't yet have their own rules and regulations on how they should treat each other in regards to slavery. I mean, obviously they experienced slavery for X amount of years. So they leave slavery. They're like, well, now what do we do? And then God comes down. He gives his 10 commandments. Thou shalt not kill, lie, all that good stuff. And then in the very next page, he gives his rules on how you should own your fellow human beings.
Well, more for rules if you do own your human beings. But yeah, we'll go from there.
Okay.
So since neither one of us can really attest to the uh the laws that they were fleeing from or the laws of the nations surrounding them.
Well,
Uh,
I wouldn't go quite that far. I haven't done like this a deep dive to know the specific rules. But
mhm,
it seems to be consensus. There's little to be known about Greeks. They didn't start literature from the Greeks didn't really start appearing until I think it was right around 400 BC, and obviously Exodus goes well
mhm.
before that. But as far as I mean, Egypt slavery is fairly well documented. And like I said, the Romans, everybody had. I mean, the information is out there, and from what I did read, it seemed like everybody had a system of slavery, but nobody had a system of slavery where you could just literally do whatever you wanted. It all seemed to be fairly comparable, not equivalent, but just comparable to the laws that the Israelites came up with, or that in this case that God came up with. It's at least comparable.
Okay.
Is that all? I mean, can we agree that it was probably comparable? Maybe better in some areas, maybe worse in some areas,
I'll,
but
I'll
oh, okay,
yeah,
okay,
I'll concede the point.
okay, all right. Um, so
Wh-
all right,
Uh, one thing I did kind of want to get into
okay.
is the whole issue of if God has a problem with it, why would He permit it in the first place? You know what I mean?
Well, yes, and
I think that's one.
My specific question would be, if God had a clean slate, why would He still allow it? Because the Israelites are escaping Egypt. You know, these are God's chosen people. They don't have their own system of slavery yet. They're a fresh people, straight. You know, they don't have their own. I mean, this is literally what the laws are for, because they don't have any information on how they should function as a society. So God has a clean slate. And instead of saying, hey, you know what was taking place there? We're not going to do that. He gives a whole new set of rules on how maybe it's a little bit better than what they were doing, but it's still owning another human being. It seems like a pretty hard missed
Right, right.
opportunity for, the omniscient, omnipotent, benevolent ruler of the universe. It just seems like a huge missed opportunity to me. In fact, to
Right.
go to go just a little bit further,
Like,
sorry, to go just a little bit further, not only does it seem like if you were the omnipotent, omniscient, benevolent ruler of the universe, it seems like a missed opportunity. But if it's just some people trying to figure out how they should run their society now that they're freed, it seems exactly like what I would expect for people to in that time to do. It's definitely not what I would expect a omniscient God to do.
all right. Yeah, no worries. So I would say, while yes, God has a clean slate for a nation, he doesn't have clean slates for people. And what I mean by that is the Jews were enslaved for the past 400 some odd years. Like, that's all they know. That's all their grandparents knew. That's all their grandparents' knew,
Mhm.
is slavery, how to be slaves, how to treat slaves. And to go from that to no slavery,
Would be
while
amazing.
while that would it would be amazing. You're right.
Yeah, yeah.
Just like, yeah, wouldn't it be amazing if God said don't kill and nobody killed, right?
Yeah, but unfortunately God didn't say don't have slaves. I mean, the slavery is still taking place.
Yeah,
Yes, so
and I
he
agree.
so he was able to say don't kill, don't steal, don't lie, don't cheat, and then there's like four ones about not worshiping any other god. He was able to say don't do these things, and those things still took place, but he just couldn't get up to the slavery aspect. He's like, don't kill, don't lie, don't cheat. Uh but you can still own other humans.
Sure.
Yeah.
And one thing, one reason I would probably say, again, not scripture. This is my theorizing,
Mhm.
is we we are all slaves in one form or another. Slavery isn't like, okay, if you're again, let's say for the sake of the argument, God of the Bible is real.
Yes, I'm granting that.
Those who follow him, okay, those who follow him are slaves to his will. Now, we have our own free will, but we submit ourselves to his will. So slavery, in that sense, like, everybody is owned, assuming that that God is real. So like we all, whether we believe in him or not, are owned. So it's not against God's nature to own a human being. The problem
Is it against
is
God's
that,
nature? Real quick, is it against God's nature for a human being to own another human being?
I would say no,
You don't think?
but that, hmm? Go
So
ahead.
you think that it's not against God's nature for one human to own another human? as property.
Right. Uh, okay. As property, I would say that since we all belong to God, we're all God's property, and because of that, no, we humans should not own other humans
Okay.
because we are already owned by someone else.
Okay. Well, that's not what's said in the Bible.
Mm,
In
I
fact,
agree.
the exact opposite is
I
said.
agree that that's not
So I guess
correct. Now,
okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
this is something I was kind of wanting to get to earlier.
Hmm.
Hmm? What'd you say?
No, I'm sorry. I'm interrupting. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, no worries. Uh, so this is something I kind of wanted to get to earlier. Whereas, so God doesn't, if it is true that God doesn't want slavery, let uh, then why would He permit it? Why would He allow it? Whereas He wouldn't. In fact, I think that goes directly into your question earlier. Why would He say, no murder, but not no slavery?
Well, not just
But
no
one thing He
murder,
also doesn't.
uh, uh, not just no murder, because that's a big issue. I mean, he goes. I mean, there's hundreds of these
Yeah, yeah,
laws. I mean, you have the Ten Commandments, which are the big ten, but there's hundreds of these laws. It does. It's not just no murder. These big things. I mean, he goes down to what kind of clothing you should
right.
wear,
There's
how you should cut your
there's lots of
hair.
things.
Yeah, so he forbids you cutting from hair for the side of your face. He forbids you from eating a certain type of food. He forbids you from sleeping with certain people of different things, or you know what I mean. He
Mm,
forbids
yeah,
all of these very
and that
nitpicky details, and but still permits slavery. I just want to clarify
right.
that it's not quite as simple as oh you know he doesn't allow murder, but he does allow slavery because murder is a big one. But he gets very very descriptive and very detailed on literally down to how you should cut your hair. So leaving slavery in is a pretty big one, but it's just that's more of a side point. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, I wasn't picking on that. I was just saying like, why this but not that,
Okay,
basically.
all right, fair enough.
Um, and this issue is actually tackled in the Gospels uh, when the Pharisees surround Jesus and ask him, it is it good that a man should divorce his wife for any reason? And
Yeah, sexual
Jesus
immorality.
points, right.
Hmm.
Yep. Uh, and Jesus points out and says, well, it was allowed that you can divorce your wife if you give them a certificate of divorce, meaning, you can't just say, okay, fine, we're divorced, and the next day, oh, I never said that, come back. It's like a receipt, right? Proof of the, transaction, for lack of better words. But he goes on to say it wasn't this way from the beginning. In or have you not read that in the beginning God created male and female, and for this reason man shall leave his mother and father and cling to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh, and let no one separate what God has joined together.
Hmm.
So he's harkening back to the way God created the earth in Genesis to say this is the ideal. This is how
Yeah,
God meant it to be.
yeah. No, I
And that's
totally
the whole
get.
crux of my argument is,
Are you essentially blaming slavery on the fall? This isn't
yes.
this yeah. So yeah, I mean this is a yeah. I've heard the argument. But again, the world would murder be ideal in the fall in a fallen world?
No,
Would murder or I'm sorry in an unfallen world would murder be the ideal?
no.
In a fallen world would murder be the ideal?
Murder wouldn't be ideal in either world.
In either world, right? Is there a rule saying that you can't murder, even though murder isn't the ideal? Is there a rule saying that you can't do it?
right, and there is a rule saying you can't do it,
Okay.
and
So hold on,
that
just real quick.
and
So if we have a fallen world and the ideal isn't murder, we have a fallen world and the ideal isn't slavery. In one context, there is a rule against it, and in one context, there's a rule permitting it. I just don't buy the argument that it's because it's a fallen world, because even though it's a fallen world, we still have rules and regulations on what we can and cannot do.
correct.
So,
Now you
um,
now right, right. Um, sorry, you're cutting in and out, so I'm trying to pick the right time to
oh, I
butt in and
apologize.
respond. It's
Well, unfortunately, there's a delay, and that's why it
uh
it seems like I might be cutting you off. I mean, and it's a problem I have, man. I interrupt so much, so I apologize in advance for that. But yeah, there is a delay in our communication here. That's just kind of how it is. But yeah, go ahead, man. I'm
I
sorry.
got you. Okay. Uh, so no worries. I'm just trying to get my thoughts together.
Yeah, take your time.
So you brought up, not only slave or no slave, murder, no murder. You brought up, trimming the side of your beards, how you're supposed to dress, what you're supposed to eat. I'm sure you've heard the argument there are, moral laws and the civil Levitical laws. There's a separation between the two, right? You've heard that argument?
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't think when it says that you shouldn't trim the side of your sideburns, basically, I don't think that's a moral law. I think it was a way to distinguish Jew from Gentile, not necessarily to do with morality.
Right. It's just legislation for the law for the uh, nation of Israel at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's the same reason they said, oh, don't eat shellfish, don't eat pork. It's I think for I'm trying to remember the exact uh reason. I'm pretty sure there was a reason given in Leviticus for the dietary stuff, but even if there's not,
Yeah, I
there
mean,
is that separation between uh
sh- yeah, I think there's some things that are rules put in place to distinguish themselves as a culture. I think there were some rules put in place because certain things were deemed unclean to eat, and maybe you can ground that in some type of like food-borne illness at the time, this and that. But yeah, I mean, I understand that there's moral laws and there's cultural laws. Sure.
there we go. Let's call it moral laws and cultural laws. Um so when we talk about slavery as a moral issue, that really wasn't even the case until the 1800s. Pretty much no nation in the world. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think any nation in the world really had a moral problem with slavery. They just didn't want to be slaves themselves. Do you have? Can you speak on that?
Well, like I said, the you can find readings. Oh boy, uh, some Greek name, a philosopher in Greek, in I, is it like I said, as early as like 400 BC, um, the Greek culture was already starting to definitely speak out against, and so 400, 2400 years ago, the Greeks were already starting to speak out against owning other humans. Yeah, absolutely. But regardless of whether it's a moral, whether the people of the time regarded it as a moral issue or not, it's still immoral. I mean, the whole time it's been an immoral act, whether or not it was recognized as such. it was always immoral. It just maybe it wasn't recognized in certain cultures as
Right.
immoral, but it still was immoral.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's I would agree with that. Yeah. But then again, when it comes to the issue of owning owning other people, I I would still say it's an issue of weaning them off of it. Now, it goes back to the question, and we can, that, like, this is a, this kind of goes in a circle, round and round we go.
Mhm.
Why didn't God just outright say no slaves? Again, I got to say I don't know. I cannot answer that for you. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Uh,
I would also. I mean, my answer would probably be the same, except I would take it a little bit further because obviously I don't believe that uh, a God exists, especially the Abrahamic God. So I think it's really easy to
sure,
answer why it was it writ why um, the the Old Testament and the New Testament specifically, but or not specifically, but talking of the Old Testament, it seems as though God's morality lined up perfectly with the culture of the time. So it's very easily explained by this was written by humans who were doing the what they thought was the best that they could do at the time. That explains it perfectly. When you add a god into it, that's where the confusion comes in. So I mean, I think it's very easily explained to just say that the Bible was written by humans from a human mind doing the best they could with the knowledge they had of the time.
right, right. And I would say that from that perspective, given, you know my lack of knowledge of that particular, or rather the surrounding cultures at the time, I honestly can't uh, can't speak much more on that topic.
Sure, yeah, no problem.
Um, yeah. Now
Um, yeah, go ahead.
that being said, you uh, would you mind too much if we kind of switch gears to, because you brought up, you said, because you don't believe in the existence of any god at all, right? Am I Did I mishear that?
My official stance would be that I am unconvinced any god exists. Yes.
That any god exists? Okay,
Hmm.
okay. What is your personal opinion on the historical Jesus Christ?
I'm perfectly fine with the notion that he was a human being that walked the earth at some point at some period of time. I don't believe he was divine in any way,
That he
or yeah.
Okay. So you believe he existed, which, you know is is
Uh,
actually pretty cool, because I'm
well, I
seeing
mean,
more and more, Jesus never existed. It's like,
I'm
well,
not I'm not 100% convinced that he existed. I'm just fine. I mean, that's not an argument. The fact that he didn't exist would isn't an argument that I would ever make. I would just grant it. Okay, yes, he was a real person. Because whether he was, I mean, in my opinion, whether he was or wasn't isn't super important. So I just grant the argument. I mean, I believe he's mentioned uh, outside of the Bible. There's enough reason to believe that he was a real person that it wouldn't be worth arguing that he wasn't to me.
Okay. Um. So and uh you also concede that he was written of outside the Bible. And I would even a lot of people that I talk to, I don't know if this is your stance, say that well you can't reference, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John because it is in the Bible. And is that your stance on that?
It would depend. If it's a specific claim, then I
Okay.
would say no, because the Bible is the claim, not the evidence, in my opinion. So if you want to say that, uh,
Okay.
yeah, if the Bible's making the claim, are you kind of pointing towards the resurrection?
Well, that is eventually where I want to go, but baby steps at a time. I want to see where we line up on certain issues leading up to that. You know what I mean?
So I would say it entirely depends on the claim. If it's I saw Jesus taking a drink of water, yeah, I don't care. I'll grant it. If it's um, I saw Jesus appear 3 days later in an empty, or on a road from an empty tomb, I would say no. The Bible would not be evidence of that. That would just be that's the claim that they're making. So the Bible or the evidence would have to come from definitely from somewhere else.
Okay. So, all right, but so the documents of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you realize there was no Bible when these documents were written.
Yes,
They weren't even part of the same book. They're four separate independent documents.
yes,
You can see. Okay, cool.
yeah. I mean, yeah. Well, of course. I
So
mean, the Bible itself
my
wasn't put together in any official manner till a few hundred years later.
about
Uh,
300 or so.
yeah. So yeah, of course they didn't have.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, and I'm I'm saying things the way I say them, not not to sound condescending if it's coming off like that.
No, not at
It's
all.
I I'm trying to yeah, I'm trying to figure out, you know, what specifically where you're coming from when you hear about the gospels and Jesus and you know everything related to the
Sure.
conversation.
Do you mind if I just ask a clarifying question? Is
Sure.
this
Go ahead.
is I is this going to tie back into slavery? Or are you moving on to a new point?
Oh, sorry. I thought I was clearer on that earlier. No, I'm conceding slavery. I can't, you know, I don't really have the historical information uh, to really talk much on that subject. Uh, I probably could have prepared a little bit better for that, but I
No,
didn't even
it's no
see the
problem.
notification that that's.
Okay. If that's the case,
It's
yeah,
just I
dude.
didn't get the
Uh,
notification that we're
I'm
gonna talk about an hour, like an hour or two beforehand.
yeah.
So
Okay. I'm 100% fine with moving on to a new topic. Do you mind? I'm gonna go ahead and cut this video here, and then so it'll be two separate videos. If you want to move on, I'm 100% fine with that.
yeah, yeah, sure.
Okay. All right. Let me. All right.